Is that recording?
Yeah, pre-roll.
Oh,
Pre-roll.
The outtakes.
Pre-roll. Okay, all right. I gotta get my songs going.
So we're here in Nashville at the end of ViVE 2023. I'm here with Paulius, and we got a guest here, Blake Madden with Hospitalogy.
Best newsletter out there after XBC.
Actually, that's right.
I agree.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're just going to riff about kind of what we did at ViVE, what we learned, and just whatever. So either of you, any thoughts to start us off?
Well, I was to say, Blake's actually been productive and pumped out a post. I think it'd be fun to hear what his impressions were so far, given that this was one of his first bigger conferences as a media pass holder.
Yeah, so I was officially on the media train, which feels weird. Still feels like I'm, fresh into the space. So, but yeah, I mean, stayed out late Monday night and then had to crank out a post Tuesday morning. So if you've noticed the post was a little delayed, that's why. So, I mean, really, honestly, had a lot of really good conversations, and, this being my first healthcare conference, it was good, being face-to-face, you just have so much more kind of organic interaction, and you kind of get to hear a little more about, the inside baseball, what's going on a little bit, or people are a little more comfortable with saying, oh yeah, we invested in them, and, we're really excited about that. So, I would say one of the biggest themes for me, I've got a couple big themes from the event, and first of which being that it seems like AI is really kind of taken on as the new buzzword in healthcare right now. And I wrote about that a little bit briefly, just saying how AI is the new Web3, essentially. Not really to that degree, because I think AI has a lot of use cases in healthcare and to boost productivity. So had a lot of interesting conversations around that, including around ambient clinical documentation, AI and colonoscopy work and so forth. So I really think that AI is going to be used as rather than replace or fully automate, more so to augment tool. So I'm really excited to kind of see how AI gets integrated from here on out. And then secondly, just talking about just the whole vibe of the venture scene. It seems like there were a lot of presentations and panels on the focus on profitability, which is what we've seen over the past 6 months or so. So, probably in prior events, people were focused on, growth and, how to deploy capital and enter markets and all those sorts of things. And now it's more about, leaning up and sustaining your cash burn and focusing on your unit economics. So I think it's kind of a healthy shift. It was, interesting to see that, and yeah, lots of interesting takeaways from the event.
I've noticed that there are really a lot more of a presence of infrastructure companies, and maybe they were present in health too in November 2022, and maybe they were just not as prominent because there were so many more health delivery platforms. You have all of the direct-to-consumer ones that were present in Vegas but not here, and obviously I think maybe that's a reflection of the funding climate and the downturn. But that was quite interesting, I would say, that infrastructure was really at the forefront.
Yeah, and in addition to AI, I was looking into interoperability a lot this time. Got to know the Zeus team really well, got to know the Particle team, and then chatted with the Health LFO. And besides for those three, I would say more major players, there's also a bunch of people bringing in data within health systems, between health systems. I think we're really building towards a more interconnected world where data isn't just siloed in all these places. And to your point about a lot of the care delivery companies not being here, one of the things that we've been talking about looking into is what do we do about all these single verticals and their data, right? Because they're not part of these health exchange networks, and nobody's really getting stuff from them. So curious to see what these individual companies end up doing in terms of sharing the data.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Paulius, to your point, it seemed like it was just almost all B2B companies here. So I guess, it's just kind of how the market's working, and folks are focused on infrastructure. I was talking to a couple investors who, they had invested in an enablement company, and now to kind of balance out the portfolio, they were looking for an enablement infrastructure company. So it does seem like that there are some investment dollars, and it seems like infrastructure is the new buzzword think Jan Felix tweeted about that.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of people that we know, I think that's always a fun part of the conference is to just, the real life manifestation of Slack. You just have a lot of chats happening at once, and you're able to pop in and out and kind of get to see how people are doing. Also, it was really fun to see people actually living the startup life and being scrappy and getting creative and having presence on the floor and getting creative with having equipment that might be rental or not. I think that was really cool to see because that's, I don't know, I keep comparing things to health because that's kind of like one of our baseline conferences, but there was just a lot more Fiji water, whereas here the water fountains were often
there was no water.
Yeah, the water was scarce, and I think that it's somewhat symbolic of how things are going right now.
The water is scarce.
Yeah. And speaking of like the LinkedIn or like meeting our LinkedIn friends in real life, the Slack groups, I think the happy hours really are a big part of this conference, even though they're not officially part of the conference. That's where you get to see people, and a lot of really interesting conversations happen at night over karaoke or whatever. You get to know the people, see the people, and it really makes these like online interactions a lot more meaningful. I think, I know what you look like without a yellow background and everything now.
Yeah, I gotta update that picture now.
and I mean, I think that's maybe even a lot more to what's happening with like JP Morgan conference, where people just happen to be at the same place at the same time, but not really, the sessions is not where things happen. It's just people happen to come in where there's a critical mass of, like minds, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I feel like there's some sort of startup opportunity there. I don't know what yet. Coordinating like the Perry conference.
That's right. I mean, speaking of
like
startup,
reaching off of
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there. I think that really manifested something for us to try to pitch that. Something we've been thinking quite a bit about, finding a way to educate our colleagues that are trying to build cool stuff in primary care, but are not often up to speed in just understanding the landscape of primary care or understanding the complexities and nuances, even at the level of people describing what primary care versus chronic care versus urgent care means, and it can be a different signal to different people. So it's been kind of fun thinking about how can we take this knowledge and these discrepancies that are out there and like put it together into a course for people, and then we've had some interest, I think, of those who would want to use it for onboarding their engineers or sales teams that essentially interact with clinicians.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we mentioned this when we did our health recap, which is where like all these companies out here, maybe less so here than at health, but almost everybody's engaged in primary care in some way for some reason. And we kind of, yeah, huh?
It's the glue.
It's the glue, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm actually kind of curious since you're joining us, because we have a very like primary care focus, but like, are you seeing a lot of primary care activity, and what's your take on it? Like, why are people doing it, and like what are different ways that they're iterating? And do you see almost a lack of definition of what primary care is?
Yeah, that was going to be my next point, is that I think that course will be really interesting because primary care is evolving so much right now. So like, if you think about something like home health, for instance, like from my past life, I always considered home health as like a post-acute, post-discharge destination. Whereas now it's morphing into like part of primary care. So you're seeing kind of all of these integrated models come together between primary care and then specialty care, and then also like specialized primary care almost, where they're like focused on like specific populations and taking risks. So it's a really interesting space, and I'm glad you guys are covering it. What was the second part of your question?
I don't remember. I had like 5 parts. It was a lot.
Well, I had a point
we went
about
hard at the happy hours. I think it was just like, who's doing primary care? Are you seeing a lot of primary care activity in the definition of it?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's why you've seen so much acquisition, so much M&A in primary care, is that you've got these kind of big payers become morphing into these payviders, right? Everybody knows that buzzword these days. So CVS acquiring Oak Street Health, because Medicare Advantage and policy from the top down is incentivizing things like patient engagement and patient satisfaction and MA star ratings and quality metrics and those sorts of things. So the payers are like, okay, well, while we have a distinct advantage in the market over providers, let's use our capital to pay for these. Maybe CVS overpaid a little bit, but like to pay for these, like I consider pretty valuable assets within a larger organization. So yeah, I would say that that's really interesting. And then also just from a policy perspective, you got ACO REACH and shared savings programs and all of the MSO kind of enablement players. All of them have been outperforming and like growing really well and onboarding physicians and saving a lot of money. And their ACOs, like Aledade is one of the best performing ACOs in MSSP. So all that's being said, like there's a lot of tailwinds right now from a policy, and then also payers are also incentivizing that, kind of everyone taking on risk and getting closer to the total premium dollar. So lot to cover. So I'm sure your course will be quite robust.
Yeah. Well, I think with our course, what we're doing is really setting a baseline, right? Like a 101, because there's a lot of people, because you just talked about a lot of things, and each of those things requires a ton of context. And when you're coming in from other industries, or even going from like sales to an executive role, or you're a data analyst, like you don't really think about these things or care. And you might parrot some of these like talking points or these buzzwords, but you don't know what they mean. Everybody just says them and you're like, yeah, totally.
Everyone hides behind buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're very easy to hide behind. And so what we're trying to do with our 101 course is just get everybody kind of on the same page. It's like, okay, who are these people? How do we think? What's going on? So very interesting. But any major takeaways from the conference? Either something you were surprised by or expecting, or just something you learned?
I will say overall it was a really awesome experience, just getting to meet folks I've only met virtually in person, and it really just hits different. But I will say just one thing I was just a little surprised by is the like you said, lack of care delivery companies, but also specifically just the lack of health system involvement, especially given that Nashville is like such a hub of traditional healthcare players. And I know it's not necessarily like ViVE, it's more so for like innovation and startups and digital health, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of health systems right now need support in a lot of areas that they're trying to outsource, and like on cost containment and also just revenue diversification and so forth. And so I guess I was just a little surprised I didn't see more of them around the floor. Maybe they were there and I didn't notice them, but would have liked to have interacted with some of them.
Well, they're in the Perry conference, right? They're around the conference.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll say about you.
For me, actually, I think seeing a little bit more physician presence at this conference was interesting. I think that actually meeting physician entrepreneurs, even unexpectedly, was kind of cool. And then learning directly from them some of the nitty-gritty, like venture stuff. Not really having taken business classes, I got to understand a bit more about how valuations happen, how people, give out equity based on whatever funds they raise. And I think, learning at conferences this way has really been a lot more fun for me than reading a book. And I think hopefully we can take some of that and distill it for other people. I think, going to the AMA lunch was informative in different ways. I think, probably many doctors don't even know how AMA has, deals in the CPT codes. I think that's like a really interesting paradigm that, we use them daily in our practice, but we don't really understand how things move at the policy level, the business level, behind the scenes. And so just being exposed to some of that and actually meeting the people that are, managing CPT as a product, that was kind of cool.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that because the president-elect came and gave a talk. He's an anesthesiologist, and he's younger, and he's somebody who's actually interested in tech. And even though like a very small percentage of practicing physicians are actually part of the American Medical Association, it'll be interesting to see like how he pushes the organization and see if some of his like tech focus will advance to AMA and get more people, potentially like us who otherwise aren't participating with them, to get more involved. yeah, for me, the interop thing was something that I was coming in to focus on. Really, just meeting the people was really cool and hanging out with them. There's one interesting thing. I was talking to someone at Pearl. They do the ACO Reach stuff now. But in terms of just talking about like risk management, how like Medicare Advantage people are actually easier to risk stratify than like commercial people like under 65, because with MA they have all these like chronic conditions and they get worse over time. If you manage them, then it's fine. But young people, they could just be like fine, or develop like a crazy disease that's crazy expensive all at once, or like get in a big accident. It's actually harder to like do your risk calculations there. So that was just a fascinating fact I have to like sit and think about a lot.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like you have a lot less prior data to call upon to figure out what is the pattern going to continue or not, right? And so the commercial advantage type of buzzword, that crossover Scott Stream's been putting forth, is I think that's really an interesting area that's going to be developing after Medicare Advantage cools off.
Yeah. And we usually do this in our interviews, but we'll count this as a semi-interview since you're here.
Okay.
But what do you think is the future of primary care?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot.
That's right.
I feel like I've kind of talked about it a lot. I'd like to just see more integration between like primary care and specialty care, because primary care is the quarterback, but at the same time, specialty care drives a lot of the procedure-based volume and a lot of the cost. Along with like drugs and so forth. So I'd love to see just primary care continue to evolve and form like multi-specialty, to where it's like, hey, we're all taking risks together. So let's use this generic instead of this high dollar, and like share the savings across the whole practice or organization. So yeah, I think that, and then I'm excited about the enabling players, and ACO Reach seems like it's going to be a good program, which has a nice balance of like quality and like social determinants, but also economically feasible. So yeah, just excited for that. And then I think that there are a couple other CMMI programs on the horizon. CMMI, I can slur that.
Sure.
So I'm keeping an eye out for that, just to see where they're thinking and that sort of thing. So it's fun. Lots of activity.
Appreciate the insight. And so upcoming next, you're going to HIMSS.
Yes, that's in Chicago.
That's coming up next. And then we have with XPC our spring retreat coming out in Virginia.
That's right.
In May. So that'll be fun, and we'll write a little debrief on that. Are you going into anything interesting anytime soon?
No. Well, I think I'm going to the healthcare marketing. I can't remember the name of it. It's in mid-April, so I'll be at that. I'm actually speaking at that about generative AI. So
nice. Yeah.
That's really cool. I think more entities should sponsor Blake to go to conferences and cover them.
That's right.
I think it's a missed opportunity if they don't.
I appreciate that, man. You're too kind.
Yeah. All right. Well, ViVE has been fun. We are all getting ready to head out of Nashville back home. A lot of thoughts, a lot of fun, a lot of good times, and I guess we'll see everybody on LinkedIn.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
Keep the good LinkedIn vibes going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Blake.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah.
Surprise video.